Thank you for that introduction, Helen. Yeah, so as Helen mentioned, I did speak to at least some people in this group a couple of months ago, but in case you weren't here, my name is James Lamb. I'm a software engineer at a company called Saturn Cloud, but I've been working as a data scientist for about 5 years at a couple of different companies. Um, I also am an open source maintainer on a couple of open source machine learning, data science-y projects. And so in that time, I have read hundreds of data science resumes, interviewed a couple dozen data scientists, including Helen, and I have also recently gone through a data science job search. I just changed jobs in April. So I've been having these conversations with people where I kind of talk them through what the data science landscape looks like, what it looks like to get a job in data science, and that's what I'd like to do today. So let's get started. So here's what I'd like to talk through today. I'm going to talk through a little bit of the process of choosing which jobs to apply to, getting to an interview, and then actually getting that job once you get to the interview. And then I already know that some of you have submitted questions. So at the end, we can talk through those specific questions first, and then any other questions that people have, I'm happy to answer them and happy to get started. Let me just grab my phone real quickly so that I can keep track of the time. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so choosing a job. By the way, if you don't recognize these slides, all of these pictures are from a Pixar movie called Onward. It is about an epic journey with trials and tribulations and twists, and it's kind of like the road to getting a data science career. I strongly recommend watching this movie. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is that the title data scientist is not that important. And I understand saying that, I have had that title, and I remember what it felt like the first time that I got a job that was called data scientist. I thought, this is amazing. I love doing this. I don't want to undersell the importance of that. But when you're looking for your first job out of school, I don't think, I've talked to people who've said, well, I really want to do data science as a career, but I think I'm just going to apply to data analyst jobs or data engineer jobs. And the implication when they talk like that is that they think that those are different, or that is somehow like a lesser job. All of these titles on the screen, including actuary, by the way, are related to doing data science work. Data science work is taking data and a business problem and using computers to solve the business problem with the data. That's it. So many of these opportunities, I just want to encourage you to look for these different types of titles and to know that if your first job out of school is as a data analyst, as a business analyst, as a data engineer, as an analytics consultant, that you are still on the way to working in data science. That doesn't mean that you're not working in data science. My first two jobs out of college, so I studied economics in college. My first two jobs out of college, I was an economic analyst and a financial economist. And in both of those jobs, I was working with data, solving business problems, reporting statistical results to people who didn't really understand statistics, all of kind of the main skills that you would use as a data scientist, at least the main soft skills. Okay, the next thing that I want to talk about is that I feel that the job market is a lot friendlier now than it was in March and April. I have good kind of anecdotal evidence for this, and I have also just, I went through a job search in April, so I spoke to recruiters and I saw what they were talking about. In March and April, there was a lot of uncertainty around the world, but definitely in the U.S. about what the path of the virus would look like, how American life would change, how the economy would change, how companies would react. And so a lot of companies responded to this massive, massive uncertainty by cutting costs, by freezing hiring, by furloughing employees, by laying off employees, by delaying start dates. I have a couple of friends who had job offers to start in late March, and they left their previous jobs. They were ready to start, and then they were told, it was going to be 3 or 4 extra weeks until they could start working. That's effectively a furlough, even though they didn't work there. I have another friend who got a full-time data science job offer from a company here in Chicago. He was ready to go, and the night before, the Sunday night before his first Monday, they told him his job offer had been rescinded. March and April were really, really difficult time in the data science job market in the US. However, what I found talking to people who are in the process of applying right now and looking around at jobs myself is that it has gotten a lot better. So I've talked to some people who've said, well, I was applying to jobs in March and April. I didn't really get any bites. No one was really interested in me. And so I'm kind of disheartened. I kind of am not sure what to do. I think that now the data science job market is a lot friendlier. I have seen that companies have kind of gotten used to what it looks like, what the economy looks like in the time of Corona, what coronavirus means for their business, and that's meant that they've started hiring again. They've started building out their teams. They've started doing stuff. And so to that point, one thing that has changed about that job market is the presence of remote-only full-time data science jobs. So when I was looking for remote-only jobs, maybe 5 years ago, it seemed to me that most of the remote-first data science roles in the U.S. were contract positions. They were called like data science freelancer or data science contractor or something like that, where it was kind of a precarious work situation. There was an offer of maybe a month, maybe 3 months of work with a possibility of being hired, but you didn't really know. Kind of a difficult situation. I think that what I've seen now is there are a lot of high quality, full-time, remote-first data scientist jobs in the United States. So I actually found the job that I'm in today by literally Googling remote data scientist jobs. And Google has this Google Jobs widget, which I had never seen before, that aggregates jobs from a ton of other sites, from sites like LinkedIn and Indeed and kind of the big ones that you know about, but from a ton of other really, really small, very specialized job boards like this Anywhere website and remotes.co and all these little specialized things. So if you're thinking about data science jobs, I mean, this might be true for careers in general, but I know for sure for data science, there are a lot of high quality, remote-only data science jobs at firms that you've heard of doing interesting and important work. So I think that a lot of companies have realized, when they had to send all of their employees for mostly working from home during the pandemic, that can actually work for their business, and that hiring people remote can allow them to get more, kind of cast a wider net for talent than they were before. Okay. The next piece of advice that I have for kind of choosing a job is my general rule, and the rule that I recommend that you follow is that you should apply to a job if you're at least 50% qualified. So in data science, the kind of path from requirements to getting the job, it's not quite as clear as the way that Howard has described being an actuary to me, where there's a set of certifications and exams that you have to pass, and if you pass the exams, you have a good chance of getting a job, and if you don't, you don't. In data science, people are generally horrible at writing data science jobs. So this picture is an actual data science job posting that I found on LinkedIn last night from ConAgra Foods for a data scientist 2. A data scientist 2, that's a career for someone who is, maybe like 3 to 5 years out of college. That would be my expectation. And this is like very, very intimidating, right? You have to have a higher degree, and they don't tell you whether that means PhD or master's degree in one of these disciplines. I see. Master's with 1 year of experience or bachelor's with 4 years of experience. That's a pretty high bar, honestly, for a data scientist too. And then there will be in these data science job descriptions, a lot of these items that are left to interpretation. So they'll say strong coding in Python. And I have talked to candidates, to people who are applying to jobs who've convinced themselves that they don't have strong coding in Python. They have some idea in their head of what strong means, and they've decided that they don't have it. Or understanding AWS S3. Okay, AWS S3 is a huge thing to understand. So they haven't really told you what they want to do. And the comparison here between S3, HDFS, and HBase kind of doesn't make sense. It kind of doesn't make sense. Those aren't really all the same thing. They can kind of be used to accomplish the same goal, but not really. But the point here is that this is really typical of data science job descriptions, that they will say they'll have these phrases like strong Python ability, experience in time series and forecasting. And my advice to you is to not say no to yourself, to make them say no to you. Don't tell yourself, I'm not strong at Python. I don't have enough experience in time series. The best that you can do is just kind of, send in your resume, give them a representation of what you do. And if you think you're at least 50% qualified, you have a good, you have as good a chance of anybody as getting an interview. Okay, part 2, let me just check the time. You're doing great. Okay, so part 2, the next thing I want to talk about is kind of getting to an interview. Now that you've chosen data science jobs that you're interested in, the title, the company, I want to talk a little bit about what it takes to get your resume noticed. Let me take a sip of water. So I remember when I was in college and they were helping me write my first resume, there were all these rules. There was a rule that said your resume had to be only 1 page. And there were these templates that they gave us. And the implicit rule in those templates was the only thing you're allowed to have on your resume is it's basically supposed to look like an outline with headers and bullet points. I don't think that that's true. As someone who's reviewed hundreds of data science resumes, you are free to customize and to do what you want. And one thing that I really strongly encourage is writing a small personal statement. So this personal statement in the red box is the one that I used in my resume in my most recent job search. This can really, really help a recruiter or a hiring manager to understand what you're looking to do and what you know without them having to do the guesswork of reading through your resume and figuring it out. Because the reality is a lot of data science resumes, especially new grad data science resumes, look very, very, very similar. There will be maybe an internship. Most of the experience will be from class projects, and then there will be a list of technologies like this one that I have on the right that says, here's some stuff I did in Python, here's some stuff I did in R, I know Git, I know SQL, and they look very, very similar. I found that having this short overview, the short personal introduction, can really help you to explain to a recruiter what you're trying to do, what you're interested in, and what you're knowledgeable about. And I know when I see this on resumes, that really helps me to have a better understanding of what a candidate is bringing to the table and what they, how they're pitching themselves. So if you're not sure how to write one of these, their advice that I give is to write one of these statements as if you have 3 seconds to describe yourself to a recruiter. So this is much, much shorter than maybe the elevator pitch phrase that you've heard before. Okay. The next mistake that I see on data science resumes is people who are talking about work or school project experience where they're doing some statistical work, but not connecting to business value. And so I've given some examples here. I know this is kind of wordy. I don't like to have this many words on a slide, but I think this is important. So for example, I'll see on a resume, I trained a CatBoost binary classification model with 98% recall. Well, as a recruiter, I don't really care about that. I mean, I care, that's good. But what I'm interested in is why was the problem a binary classification problem? And is 98% recall good? Is that a good model? Is that good enough for the problem that you're trying to solve? And so the way that you can do that in your resume is to reframe it in terms of business value. So, for example, I spoke to someone last week who works on, or in her internship, she worked on the consumer price index, the kind of headline inflation index. And she described to me this process of how they process the CPI, and there's an army of people all over the country who go out to stores, they write down prices, they send them back into a system, and some human beings manually analyze those price quotes. And she built a model to detect which ones actually needed to be manually analyzed and which ones could be automatically accepted. And that saved a ton of time for those human reviewers. It allowed them to focus more on the really hard ones, and allowed them to kind of get more out of their staff. So describing the work in that way, saying, hey, I saved analysts 10,000 unnecessary reviews or whatever, that is something that will show me, okay, you not only understand how to do the machine learning work, but you understand how to connect it to business value. And when I say business value, that doesn't mean it has to have been something that you did in the context of working for an organization or a for-profit company. Even for a school project, just business value just generically means describing what the model did and what it was for, and not in statistical terms. So not saying it's a regression model, it's a classification model, but saying, I was trying to detect cats in images uploaded to Instagram or something like that. Just describing the real world thing you were trying to do and then how you chose a machine learning approach. That's the kind of thing that will make your resume stand out. And I've given another example here, but I think you get the point. I don't think I need to belabor that. Okay, so the next thing that's really important is you will have to prove that you can code. Especially if you are coming, straight from an academic setting, straight from a graduate degree. If I see that you have a graduate degree and that you've studied in the University of Illinois math department, I know that you can do math. And I know that the machine learning stuff, if you don't know it, you will pick it up very fast. I'm not worried about that. I know that you're intelligent when I look at your resume. And the biggest question that I'll have is, can you write code? Because there are, it's a common thing in data science world to see resumes from people who are very intelligent, very good at math, who just cannot write code. And a big part of the job in data science is making your work reusable by others, making sure that your work is repeatable, making sure that your work is tested and testable so that you can have confidence in a company relying on it for their day-to-day operations. And so it's really important to prove that you can write code. And one way that a lot of candidates do this is to include a link to their GitHub on their resume, and to make sure that that GitHub has some maybe some side projects or some open source contributions or something like that. And within the last year, GitHub has added this feature called a personal README, where you can basically you can basically set up a landing page that is your homepage when somebody goes to your GitHub, your profile, where you can kind of describe what you do. So this one I took from our friend Stephanie Kermer. She just gives a quick introduction. It's kind of like that 3-second overview that I talked about on the resume. She says, who she is, what she does, and then she's kind of drawing your attention to the things that she wants you to look at, code that she's written, talks that she's done. This is a great way to make sure that recruiters are looking at the things that you want them to look at on your GitHub, instead of just providing a link and leaving all your repos up there and hoping that they click on the one that you're most proud of or the one that you think really showcases what you can do. I'm happy to answer more questions about this later, but there are a bunch of things that you can do to kind of show that you're comfortable managing a code base. I'll show some examples of that later. Okay, and then to get to the final interview, you're going to have to do a take-home case study. Let me take another sip of water. So it's very, very common in data science jobs for you to do a take-home case study before you do a final interview. And the take-home case study, it's usually time-boxed. It's usually, I've seen as short as 2 hours, as long as 8 hours. But what that will look like is you arrange a time with a recruiter, and the recruiter is going to send you a description of a problem and some instructions on how to get some data related to the problem. And then they're going to ask you to write some code that processes the data, build some sort of statistical model to solve the problem with the data, and then you'll kind of have a certain amount of time. You'll do that work. You'll send the work back to the recruiter, and then you'll be asked in an in-person interview to basically defend that work, to present what you did as if you had been asked to do a very, very short consulting project. So when you're applying to data science jobs, it really is like a second full-time job because you have to find time to do these case studies. They are just a part of the data science job interviewing experience, for better or for worse, that you're not going to be able to get around. So that's something to consider when you're applying to jobs. I really recommend that you cast a wide net, but as you get further into the interview stage, as you get close to that take-home case study, these can start to take up a lot of your time. So you may have to be a little bit selective about which ones you spend time on. Okay, check the time. Doing great. Okay, so we've talked about what the job market looks like, choosing a job. We've talked about how you can change your resume and some other things about your personal profile to attract the interest of recruiters. The last thing that I want to talk about is the interview process itself. once you get to the final interview. So the first piece of advice that I have is you should get comfortable saying, I don't know. Maybe some of you have read this book before, Thinking Fast and Slow. This was a summary of 20, 30, 40, I don't know, decades of work in behavioral economics and psychology by these two economists, psychologists, I'm not sure how they would describe themselves, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. And they talk about a lot of behavioral kind of quirks, the way that people think, the way that people process information. And one that they talk about is this certainty effect from this paper in 1981, where it is human nature to prefer a certain outcome to an uncertain outcome, even when that uncertain outcome has a higher expected value. So this screenshot was lifted directly from that paper. So they offered people this opportunity. They said, would you rather have $30 in your hand right now guaranteed, or an 80% chance to win $45? 80% chance to win $45 is it has a higher expected value than $30. But people tend to choose the certain outcome. The same is true in recruiting candidates. So I can tell you there were times when, when I was hiring data scientists and recruiting data scientists, where we would have a candidate who we weren't really sure if they were a good fit, but they might be. And how could we not be sure? Things would happen like we would ask them about some work that they had done, and they would describe work that their team had done without making it clear how much they did versus their team. Or, maybe we would just run out of time in the interview to ask more questions and get more information. And we come into a situation where we think, well, this candidate might be an A- fit for this job. This candidate might be a very, very good fit for this job, but I'm really not sure about a couple of these things, and they could be a C+ fit for this job. Those candidates tended to not get offers. I remember having other conversations where, someone would tell us, we'd say, how familiar are you with working with uneven time series or something like that? And they would say, honestly, I have no experience with that, but I really am interested in it and I'd be willing to learn. In that case, we'd go into the conversation. It's a very different conversation. We'd say, well, we're pretty confident that this person is a B or B+ candidate, B or B+ fit for this job. And those people, sometimes they got job offers because the reality was, we kind of had this same effect that Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky talked about. It influenced the way that we thought about candidates, and we'd rather have someone that we were very sure was a pretty good fit than someone who might be a very good fit or might be a very not good fit. So this is one of the hardest things to do when you're in a job interview for data science, but when you're asked questions that you don't know the answer to, don't feel like you need to give the interviewer the answer that he or she wants to hear. Just tell them, I don't know. Let me tell you one other anecdote about this, and then I'll move on. Before my current job, I worked for Amazon Web Services. So I interviewed at an Amazon office here in Chicago, and the Amazon final interview it's tough. It's very interesting. And in one of the interviews, someone asked me, what is your familiarity with deep learning? And I told him, I've never done deep learning, and if this job requires deep learning, I think that there's been a miscommunication and we should probably just end the interview. That was a little bit scary, but it was less scary than the possibility of them thinking that I knew something and then expecting me to do it day one and me not being able to do it. And I got a job offer from them. So being that candid, being that frank did not hurt my chances with them. So I would strongly recommend get comfortable saying I don't know. Next, you should be prepared for situational questions. And I'll let you read for 1 second. Okay, so if you Google, how do I prepare for a data science job interview, or, maybe you talk to some people who've done data science job interviews, they might tell you about the math and statistics pieces. They might tell you about the business value thing that I just talked about. The situational question is a really, really important part of a data science interview, where this is your ability to do something like what I was talking about earlier, which is to connect some work that you've done to an understanding of either the business setting that you were in or the research setting that you were in or whatever it is. So situational questions are like, tell me about a time that you failed to meet a deadline. And they're kind of open-ended. They're a little bit scary if you haven't thought a little bit about these questions. But what the kind of the best answer for these is there's this thing called the STAR method that people talk about. It's like situation, task, action, results, or something like that. So where the answers that you can give to these are like, describe the situation, describe what you did in light of that situation, and then describe how it ended up. Did it work? Did it not work? Why did it not work? In all of these answers, the practice of saying, I don't know, it kind of translates here too. It's okay to say, I tried to persuade someone of this thing and it didn't work, and here's why. Or I had to deliver this important project by this deadline, but we missed the deadline by 2 weeks, and here's why. You should expect that in a data science job interview, you will get these questions. And I also think that it is totally fine to say, for some of the questions that seem like you could only pick them up in kind of experience working in a business, if you only have kind of like research experience, I think it is totally appropriate to say, you know what, I actually have never experienced something like that just in my research work, so I really am not sure what to say to that. That's completely fine. And that's better than maybe rambling about something for 4 or 5 minutes, because it means you get to keep that time back in the interview, and they'll move on to another question that you're going to be impressive on. Okay, so we'll talk about this in the Q&A. I know one person asked this question. In my experience interviewing for data science jobs and interviewing data scientists, you will probably not need to know things like algorithms and algorithmic complexity. So when you apply to be a software engineer at some companies, you have to do these things where they'll ask you to, write out the algorithm for some sort of sorting algorithm, or they'll ask you to write out some live code that, I don't know, finds all of the unique words that could be made out of the letters of another word, or move all the zeros to the end of a list or something like that. This can happen in data science interviews. I'm not telling you it can't happen. It has never happened for me in the data science jobs that I've applied to, and that includes applying to a data science job at Amazon. So I don't know that this is the best use of your time. You may have heard of a website called LeetCode. LeetCode is a place where you can sign up and practice all of these interview problems. For data science jobs, I don't know that this is the best use of your time, to be honest. I don't have a great understanding of this, and it has never been a problem in an interview. The only time I've ever been asked to do questions like this is when I applied for software engineering jobs, not data scientist jobs. So, if you only have a couple of hours outside of your other obligations to work on improving your strength as a candidate, I honestly think that working on side projects, improving your GitHub, improving that evidence of your ability to code is going to have a lot higher payoff for data science careers than this algorithms and algorithmic complexity stuff. Okay, and then the next piece of advice that I have is when you're in the data science interview, beautiful. This one is really hard. It was really hard for me, but you have to get in the habit of saying I and not we. So this is something that they really drilled into us at Amazon. When you interview a candidate and the candidate says, I was on a team and we did this and we did that and we did this, that is not enough information to assess whether or not that candidate is qualified for the position, because you don't really know how much of the work that candidate did, or if they just kind of were on a very talented team with other people who did the work. So one of those, thinking back to the uncertainty things that I talked about, one way that you can give recruiters and hiring managers more certainty is to say I as much as possible. And that doesn't mean that you have to feel like you should be taking credit for work that other people did. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I'm saying is it's important to be really specific about which things you did. So you can say that I was working on a larger team and we did X, Y, Z, but it's important to say I did these parts. I implemented this data pipeline. I trained version 2 of this model that had this improvement, whatever it may be. That's another one of those things that can give the people who are interviewing you a little bit more certainty about what you're capable of and how good of a fit you may be for a position. Okay, and then with that, thank you so much. That's the end of my kind of lecture portion of this presentation. I have copied in all of the questions that you submitted ahead of time. So if that makes sense, I think let's just work through those, and then we have time for any other questions that people have. Does that sound good?
It's fantastic.
Okay, let's do it. This movie's called Onward. It's a really, really good movie. Okay. So the first question was, as a data scientist, there are a lot of new skills that you have to learn every day. What's the key to learning new skills, and how do you keep yourself up, how do you keep up the pace of learning? This is a great question. So let me give you two suggestions that have worked really well for me. The first is on having a side project and finding ways to kind of over-engineer it. And here's what I mean by that. If you're doing a data science competition where they say, here's a data set, and you train a model, and then you make some predictions on a new data set, one way to do that is just to write some kind of scripty code in R or Python that loads the data, trains a model, and then you're done, right? But there are a lot of ways to over-engineer that. You could make you could wrap your code up into a Python package or an R package. You could host it on GitHub as an open source project. You could set up some automatic integrations with services like Travis and GitHub Actions that test the code every time you change it. You could write unit tests. You could write a blog post about that project. You could build a small application and host it on AWS or Netlify or DigitalOcean, where people can enter in their own data and click predict and get a prediction. There are a lot of ways to kind of take even a kind of well-defined project like that and make it something much bigger. I think that is a great way to learn new skills because it's very unstructured. So it's not like you go into it and you make a bullet pointed list of these are the exact technologies I'd like to learn. In doing that, you're going to start Googling around for how do I do this thing in Python? How do I do this thing in R? And you'll learn other things on the side and kind of pick them up as you go. So I've learned a ton from that, from basically just trying to do something like that, like over-engineer a personal project, and then picking up other things that I see in discussion boards and that I see in Stack Overflow and things like that. The other thing that I really recommend is finding a data science conference to attend. So there's one that I really, really, really like called the Open Data Science Conference. And I mean, Howard can speak to the quality of this conference as well. This year, in the time of COVID, it is 100% online. I would recommend if you go to this conference to just do the kind of basic 2 days. The boot camps and the other stuff they're not worth the money. Right now, a 2-day ticket is $109. And what I do when I go to these conferences, and again, you can attend this completely virtually, is I watch these talks, and every time I hear a phrase that I don't recognize, the name of a piece of software, a statistical technique, the name of a company, whatever, I write that down in the back. I just write down just that name in the back of a notebook, and then I go back to listening to the talk. And after the talk, I go Google all of those things. I go look up what those technologies were, what those techniques were. And I have found that a conference is a really, really good way to just have a passing familiarity with a lot of data science concepts. And honestly, I found that has opened doors for me, that it's enough just to have a passing familiarity, just to know, well, I've never used Apache Cassandra, but I know that it is a NoSQL database that is linearly scalable, something like that. So I really would recommend going to the Open Data Science Conference or some other conference like that. There's another group that you all may be interested in called Chippy. That's a Chicago Python group. You can join their Slack for free and watch the data science channel. You can join their Meetup account, and they do all of these free events where people give talks. It's exactly the same principle. Oh, hey, I actually know these people. Okay, anyway, where you just watch these talks and they will talk about so many technologies that you've never learned of. It's a really, really great way to get a bunch of exposure to a bunch of different things. So I personally have found that those two, going to conferences and working on a personal project, that those two things are a really good way to keep up with what you need to know and what's changing in software and in data science. I should give you the caveat that I've never been in a role where my responsibility was to know the bleeding edge of machine learning research. So the roles that I've been in, I've always been something kind of like, even when I've been a data scientist, I've kind of been a machine learning engineer or something like that, where I didn't need to know that there's like a new type of deep learning architecture that is very, very good at machine translation problems or something like that. So for those types of things, the Open Data Science Conference can help. More academic conferences like IEEE or NIPS will probably be better for that. Whoever asked this question, did I answer it? Do you have any other follow-up question to that?
Yes, I'll ask that question. Thank you for your explanation. It helped me very lot.
Okay, yeah, sure, no problem. Okay, so the next question was, is it important in resumes and interviews to make myself professional to show breadth of skills, or to make myself different to participate in unusual projects? This is a really, really good question. Really, really good question. I think that what I found is making yourself look different is important because it can make you memorable to a recruiter. So I talked with someone 2 weeks ago. She did some data science work where she was building a model to label the surgical procedure portions of an endoscopic surgery video. So endoscopic surgery is the type of surgery where they take a camera on a tube and they stick it down your throat. And what she wanted to do was build a model that could take the video of that camera and just detect the periods that were the actual surgery, not the points where the camera was just being adjusted or where it was being pulled out, because that would make that data searchable. Because then a pathologist could say, okay, I want to see what it looked like the last time that we did one of these surgeries and it ended up that we found throat cancer or something like that. That was such a memorable experience. I mean, I'm still talking about it right now and still thinking about it. And that's the kind of thing that can get a recruiter excited. They can say, wow, look how cool this is. Look what this person did. Even if the underlying math and the underlying coding was maybe the same as you would do for something that's a lot less memorable, like I was predicting which customers to send an email to or something like that. So if you have the opportunity for those practical experiences that are very different, I think that, all else being equal, that can be a more powerful way to get a job than going for a breadth of a lot of things. But of course, I don't have any magic tips for how to find those opportunities. You have to get really lucky, like the internship that I did when I was an undergraduate, I was on a marketing team selling white labels, selling labels, stickers, basically. I don't have a label handy, but labels. And, that was just the internship I could get. So if you have these opportunities to do things that are like you feel are very unique, being memorable definitely will help you to get through interviews. But in the absence of that, I think that having a breadth of knowledge is important. The one other thing I'll say on breadth of knowledge that is always kind of difficult is it can be worth taking a little bit of time when you apply to a job to tailor your resume to that job, just a little bit. And so let me give you an example. When I applied to Uptake, the company where Howard and I work together, I knew that this was an Internet of Things company. And I knew that they really cared about time series data. So some of the other work that I had done that wasn't time series, I kind of minimized that on my resume. And I made really, really sure to emphasize that I had done time series work. And that meant giving a little bit more detail about the time series projects and a little bit less detail about the non-time series ones, and describing more time series statistical methods that I knew at the expense of maybe dropping off some other ones that were not time series based. And so I think that is a way that you can also look more attractive to a job. Even if you have this kind of wide breadth of knowledge to, if you have the time, to kind of tailor your resume a little bit to those things. And it's another one of those ways that doing something very different and unique, it'll be most helpful to you in jobs that care about that unique thing. So to give you another example, I talked to someone yesterday. He just finished a master's degree at University of Chicago, and he's studying language. He's a social scientist. He's studying language, and his master's degree was about online dating. He had a data set of profiles from OkCupid, and he was trying to formalize statistically how those profiles, all written in English, how the phrases that people chose and the way that they describe themselves, how those were different from kind of any random English conversation. This made him a really attractive candidate when he applied to other online dating websites, but might not have really mattered if he was applying to be like say a data scientist at a bank that is doing time series work or something like that. Does that answer the question for whoever asked this?
Yeah, it's still me.
Okay.
Yeah, I ask these questions just because it's not like my experience, but kind of my friend's experience, because he's doing a project like time series in music, in composing, to be more specific. And so I'm thinking that if I have this, experience like this, will that be interested to, like, for example, an insurance company or a financial company that has no relevance to music? So that can be seen as a different aspect of me compared to other candidates, but that may be not very professional to those kind of companies. So that's the reason I asked this question.
I see. Yeah, thank you for the great questions. Yeah, I mean, it won't hurt you, right? It's still interesting work, and if anything, one other kind of benefit of doing this work that you've described as different is you will be passionate about it. You'll be interested in it, and when you're asked questions in the interview, your passion will come through, and you'll say, "Oh yeah, I did this great thing with this music data, and we were doing whatever, and we were using AWS Deep Composer or whatever," and that passion will also help you to be memorable and to give the people who are hiring a little bit more confidence that you really like doing data science and you like the work that you do. So it won't hurt you with jobs that have nothing to do with music, and it might help with some that do.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the great questions. Okay, so the next, let me just check the time. Okay, we're doing great. The next question was, how will the pandemic impact the job search for graduates, especially for international students, and how should we adjust ourselves to it? So I'll be honest, I don't know what is different for international students who are trying to work in the US as a result of this pandemic. So I actually feel that Howen could probably answer that question better than I can.
Oh, James, just throw me a hot potato.
If that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, I'm an international student. I'm still on OPT, so I think I can answer this question. Early this year, I started to look for jobs, and I applied to a few companies. I actually got 2 offers, but then the pandemic hit, and both offers resigned it. I think that makes sense because a lot even U.S. domestic citizens are getting their offers resigned as well. And I also know that a few of my friends got their return offer resigned so that they cannot start working after graduation, which is very tough. And at the time for me, I still had a job, so I was okay. I think in general, as James described, now the market is way better than the state it was in February and March. And now companies are trying to adapt to a new normal. If you are following the news, insurance companies like Aon, I think maybe also Willis Tower Watson, they even paid back their furloughed employees because they realized that they do not need the actual cash. So with that being said, I hope those companies are going back to normal in terms of sponsoring international students in the coming semesters or in the coming years. But I think also, as James mentioned, the situation fundamentally changed some recruiting behaviors. For example, remote jobs was long not feasible for a lot of financial institutions. But now if you are following news, I believe JP Morgan just announced that they are going to work from home permanently. So if JP Morgan is going to do that, then probably other financial firms or insurance companies are on the trend of considering that as well. So things that you overlooked before may become a new opportunity. And just like I said at the beginning, risk is opportunity. You got to understand what downside you are facing and how can you leverage that to make a better bet. Okay, I know all of that are a little bit flushy, not really concrete. Let me say something more concrete. So, if you're interested in data science, I suppose you are interested in wrangling with data. And there are a lot of data set online describing H-1B jobs. And if you're interested, you should be able to find open source free data set published by official government entities of the United States. And you can just look up for yourself what companies are hiring, what companies are not, which cities are hiring and which cities are not. And also I think in the same spirit of a remote job, you probably should not limit yourself just within the United States. Canada is also very close by and they have a lot of opportunities as well. And if you are from Asia, there are many countries in Asia that are becoming more or less open, and you should be able to find data set on that as well. If you still have time in school, do some search. If this is your last year, just be very serious about any opportunity that you can get. Be very serious about the upcoming fall recruiting season, and hopefully you can, turn things upside down again.
That was a great answer. Thanks for letting me put you on the spot. Did that answer your question, whoever asked this? Okay, I'm gonna assume yes. Thank you. Okay, I think we have like maybe 3 or 4 more of these, and then we can open it up to whatever other questions. What type of data science personal projects have stuck out to you in resumes? Yeah, great, good question, good question. I'll tell you what does not stick out to me in resumes, and that is I will see these profiles where people did a Kaggle competition. I'll just introduce that in case people have never seen it before. So Kaggle.com is a website for machine learning competitions. It's 100% free. They'll put up a data set. Let's just like look at a random example. They'll put up a data set and they'll say, hey, here's this problem. Build a model with the data set, submit some predictions, and then your predictions are scored. And there's a leaderboard and people submit these models and they talk about what was good or bad about their submission. What I have seen that does not work on a data science resume or like personal projects on GitHub is you go to someone's GitHub and they just have like 6 repositories that are each named after one of these competitions. And you open it up and there's no documentation, there's no comments, it's a mess of files. All of the data have been added to the repository, so it's massive. And it's just like, you don't actually learn anything about someone from doing that. So I think like I would recommend avoiding that, just saying like, here's some code with no documentation, no description of how to use the code or anything like that. The projects that have really stuck out to me are ones where people take work like that and they maybe, I kind of mentioned this before, they put it into a package that can be installed. They add some continuous integration, some automatic testing. They have some documentation. I've seen some people who do a really good job. Like one personal project that I think can be kind of fun and really show off what you can do is they'll make their own personal website and they'll host it on GitHub Pages or Netlify or something like that. That's kind of a lot of effort, but it has been one type of project that, I can really see, oh, this person is applying to be a data scientist, but they know HTML and CSS and JavaScript and these other front-end things. That can be interesting. And then open source contributions and open source projects are also helpful. So a personal project that shows off kind of what you're capable of does not have to be your own project. It's totally fine to say, that you've made some contributions to existing open source projects if you're comfortable with that. and to show that as some evidence of your ability to write code, your ability to manage software. So, I mean, all of those things can be helpful. I would just say, as you prepare the way that you're going to show your personal projects, say on your GitHub, have someone else look at it before you feel comfortable with it being something that's linked to from your resume, and make sure that there's enough documentation there that if someone landed on the project without you there to explain it, they could still understand exactly what it is and how to use the code that's there. Does that answer the question?
James, I also want to add on to that.
Yeah.
It's also a anecdote. So I think building a personal project is great, but students or working professionals may not have that time, especially during the school years. What I did early this year was that I browse internet all the time, and I suddenly found an interesting project which I spent some time with, but I realized there's not enough documentation. So I went to the GitHub account, and I opened an issue, and then I said it would be great if you can build some documentation. And here is a package called Package Down that can help you to build documentations. And here's an example of how to easily do that. And I tried on a subset of your file, and it's easily doable with a few function calls. And you can host a HTML page as a result of that, which is easily searchable. And later on, I had a coffee chat with the maintainer of the package. And later on, I even had an interview with his company. And his company does not typically sponsor international students, but I still get an offer. So I think, if you feel like it's a very time-consuming task to do your own work, then maybe you can comment on others' work. It's all about open source and collaboration. People put stuff online, meaning that they want to share those work and projects with people, public out there. And if you comment on them, if you provide some feedback, you are almost surely going to be one of the only few people doing that, and they will remember you. And if you say something intelligent, then perhaps, and also, if they have opportunity on hand, they perhaps will just offer that to you.
That's an awesome story. I love that. Thank you. Wow, that's really cool. I'm going to be using that in the future, so thank you.
Please don't cite me though. I think that
No,
would
no,
make
okay.
it identifiable.
Okay, if you, yeah, I won't. I'll just say person A.
Thank you.
Okay, how can I land in a data science job if I don't have data science intern experience? It seems really hard to get a data science interview and I only have course project experience. Yes, I'm not going to tell you that it's easy. It definitely is hard. My first two jobs out of college, I was not a data scientist. I think I mentioned I studied economics and I was working in economics roles. So it is really, really tough to get into a data scientist job if you, I don't think that it's necessarily critical that you have data science intern experience. I think I may have mentioned before, data science as a field, as a profession, the things you have to do to be able to be a part of that profession, it's much, much less structured than being an actuary. So to be a full-time data scientist, you do not have to have had a data scientist intern experience. As I think through, my friends who are data scientists, many of them were never data science interns. They were software engineers, they were analysts, they were maybe statisticians, business intelligence specialists, maybe they did a boot camp or something like that. The bigger point is, it may be difficult to find a data scientist job if you don't have other professional experience working with data generically. That doesn't have to be a data science intern experience. That can be any sort of professional experience. I would say don't count yourself out. Make companies say no to you, because none of these are hard and fast rules. It's very, very kind of squishy. So I would still recommend applying to data scientist jobs with titles like data scientist 1, associate data scientist, junior data scientist. You may find that there are companies that are willing to take a chance on someone who's a new grad. Remember that in some ways, being a new grad, and maybe if you haven't had internship experience, in some ways that can hurt you, but in some ways that can help you, because the salary that you'll make is less than a data scientist salary of someone who's been working as a data scientist for a few years, right? So for some companies, it is actually attractive to them to hire new graduates because they feel that that is better value for their money, or maybe they are only just starting to think about data science and they're not willing to, invest a couple $100,000 a year for someone with a machine learning PhD from Stanford or something like that, I was going to say one other thing about this. Oh, the other thing I would say about this is if you're interested in working in data science, if your first job out of school is not a data science job, that doesn't mean that you can never work in data science ever again. Like I said, myself and many of my friends who do data science, they started doing some other job. What I would recommend that you be cautious of is when you if you're interested in eventually being a practicing data scientist, be very, very cautious about analyst jobs where you're only working with proprietary software, because that will be very, very limiting for your future job search. So let me give you an example. A couple of years ago, I was applying to jobs and I interviewed at AC Nielsen, the company that does all the, the TV ratings, and they do a bunch of stuff where they will sell like a Coca-Cola, some data on how many people are buying Coca-Cola products and other soft drinks. And I went to do the interview there. The job description sounded very interesting. We were doing statistical work. You're basically building models to figure out how much of a company's advertising budget should be spent in billboards versus radio versus online versus TV. And the job description sounded really interesting. And I got to the final interview and I asked some questions. I asked about the technology that we would be using at that job. And they said, well, you're going to be using SAS here. And not only are you going to be using SAS, but at Nielsen, we've written our own Nielsen-specific thing on top of SAS that you can only use here. It's proprietary software. And I thought that sounded terrible because no one in the job market would care. If I was looking for another job in a few years, no one would care that I knew how to use this, how to click the right buttons in this Nielsen-only SAS thing, right? And so I decided not to take that job. I went to Uptake instead. And this is anecdotal evidence. Take it for what it's worth. I have a friend who took a job on that team, and he is still there, and he's found it very difficult to find data science jobs outside of Nielsen because of that limiting factor, because he hasn't been spending his time learning the open source technologies that so many data science teams use. He hasn't been learning Python and R and how to work on GitHub and how to use SQL and all of these things. He's been writing code and clicking buttons in this very, very, very specific enterprise software. And I think it's been very limiting. So that's a long way of saying, be very cautious if you apply to an analyst job and it sounds like you'll be using something highly custom and proprietary. So this might look like Salesforce. If you're building Salesforce dashboards, there might not be a lot of customization there. If the company says they have their own internal dashboard tool and you're not going to be writing any R or Python or anything, just be very cautious of those things, because those things will limit your options for the future. Are there any other questions about that point? Okay, let's go to the next one. I think there might be one. Let's see. Okay, 3 more. How are we doing on time? 11:06. Beautiful. This is kind of the same. Honestly, this is kind of the same question. How do I get my steps started towards data science? Doing the personal projects like I talked about is a great thing. I know, as Howard mentioned, it takes your time. You only have so much time in the day. You may be working, you may be doing school, you have other obligations. It's really difficult. I honestly think that going to a conference like ODSC, like I mentioned, is a really, really, really good return on the investment of your time, because you spend 2 days and you just all day for those 2 days, you have people just telling you things that should be important to you. You have people, you get to start to pick up all these phrases and terms, and you see how people are using software. I think that that's a really, really good thing. And the first time that I went to that conference was when I was an economic analyst, my first job out of college. I had never written a line of code, let alone R or Python, in my life, and it was still valuable. otherwise, my only other advice and kind of first step towards data science is to, keep looking at data science job descriptions, think about what they need, and look for opportunities to learn those things on your own time, whether that be in professional experience or personal projects. Don't get distracted by using proprietary software or going really, 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 really deep on one topic like ARIMA models or something like that. Any other questions about that? Okay, fantastic. Okay, do we need to understand algorithms, dynamic programming, searching, sorting, stacks, queues, FIFO, LIFO, all that stuff? I talked about this a little bit in my presentation. In my experience interviewing data scientists and myself as a candidate for data science jobs, I have never needed to do those things in an interview, and that includes at Amazon. So I don't think that is the best use of your time. Those things are they're valuable to know. They can help you to reason about how, say, a machine learning library is working and which parts of it might be slow. They can teach you to reason about, which types of analyses can be parallelized over many machines, or which ones kind of have to be done in one machine, one thing at a time. I don't think that using LeetCode or websites like that is a good use of your limited time in preparing for data science job interviews. That's not to say that you will never see these questions in a data science interview. Like I've been saying, the profession of data science is extremely broadly defined, and you'll find that there are companies that are hiring their first data scientist or maybe their third data scientist, and they don't really have a good practice for how they interview those people. So what they do is they just take their existing software engineering interview and then they just slap on like a 30-minute conversation about machine learning at the end, and they call that a data science interview. And in those companies, you may need to know these things, but I have interviewed with a lot of companies for data science roles, and I have never needed to know these things. So I don't think it's the best use of your time. I think that working on personal projects or doing some of that open source contributing that Helen was talking about is a better use of your time towards the goal of getting your first data science job. Are there any other questions about that? Okay, fantastic. I think we have one. Okay, so this is the last submitted question, and then we can look in
James,
the chat.
sorry to interrupt. I think I want to also add on to the previous question.
Sure.
I think I want to think of this in the reverse way as well. If something, looks like a duck, swims like a duck, quacks like a duck, it is a duck. So if overall in process of interview, all they ask is all software engineering problems, then is it a really, a analytics or modeling job, or is it an engineering job? You may want to ask yourself whether that's something you want to do in the future or not. Just like if you interview for an actuarial role, and the only thing they ask is whether you can do SQL query, whether you can manage a database, and is that really an actuarial job, or is that a database admin job? So I think it's a two-way process. It's not only the company trying to filter out or select candidates, it's also the candidate getting to know about the company and getting to know about the job.
That is a fantastic point. Thank you. Oh, excuse me. Yes, that's a fantastic point. I'll tell you, from the job that I worked at Amazon, I went into the interview, the morning of the interview, I woke up and I thought, I don't really want to do this job. It was a consulting job. I had some preconceived notions of what consulting was. And I thought, I'll do this interview because I'll just go do it. I already signed up to do it. It's too late to cancel. And in the interview, I asked them questions about the job and ended up leaving the interview really excited about it because, Helen is right. That is also their opportunity to sell you on what the job will be like and why you should consider that company. So very good addition. Thank you. Okay. So I'm looking for a career in theoretical math, but I might fall back to working as a data science industry. What do I need to do to develop for a job in the industry? So I think I've covered that at this point. Whether data science is your fallback plan or your kind of primary plan, the personal projects, attending a conference or two, trying to contribute on open source where you can, and working on your kind of personal branding of your ability to code. I think those are important things. By the way, you may be surprised to hear that I haven't talked about machine learning. I'm kind of taking it for granted that this audience that I'm talking to, that you're pretty good at statistics, and that you don't need to be like taking an introductory course in machine learning or something like that. If that's not true, or if maybe some of the parts of machine learning are not a part of kind of the things that you're learning, then definitely taking like even a course on Coursera or Udemy or Udacity or something like that, that's an introduction to machine learning broadly, can be really valuable. Is there anything you want to add to this one, Helen?
Yeah, this is not an anecdote, but it's a story of a friend. I think if you're interested in research career, it's great, but industry job may not be a great fit for that. I have a friend who graduated from PhD program, wasn't sure whether he wants to directly go into academia or not. So he took a data science job instead. Well, he's doing really well, but now he wants to go back. And he embarrassingly find out that he does not have a good track record of publication, and it's making it very difficult for him to find an academic job here in the US. And he kind of regretted a bit. So he started to write a lot more papers in the past few years, especially last year. I'm hoping to get a job this year, but now the pandemic's hit. So it's really a mess. So I don't know who asked this question. I just want to offer two sides of the coin, that both theoretical math research and data science are great careers. If you're interested in one, then you probably should double down on that instead of splitting your time. And each of them will have their unique difficulty and probably will take a lot of your time. So you'd better double think before you split up your commitments.
That is a great point. Thank you. I know that we had a couple of instances where we brought people onto the data science team at Uptake, and I think that they maybe thought that what the job was similar to a research position. I think that they thought they would be publishing and earning patents and maybe inventing new math or novel applications of existing techniques to the problems we were solving. And I saw a couple of people who did that and then left frustrated after a year because they didn't want to be writing code and writing unit tests and presenting to business audiences and things like that. So I think that Helen is definitely right. There can be value in that focus. Okay, let's see what questions were in chat, if any. The name of the movie, yes, the movie is called Onward. It's a Pixar movie. You can watch it on Disney Plus if you have that. Otherwise, probably get it from Redbox or something. Really, really good movie. If we apply for different roles, should we change the personal statement for objective? I think that really, if you think that, I'll say it this way, if you think that you have something really unique to offer to a role, it's definitely worth emphasizing that in the personal statement. So, if you are applying to an investment bank and you did an internship where you were on a trading desk or something like that, it's worth explicitly saying in your personal statement, I'm a new graduate with some experience on a trading desk, looking to build a full-time career in investment banking, something like that. But if you don't feel that you have anything that's uniquely valuable to that specific job, don't feel like you have to change it every time. I used the same kind of very general statement for all of the interviews that I did because it was just kind of, I didn't really have anything too specific to say to those jobs. Where I did make changes is other parts of my resume. Like when I applied to Internet of Things jobs, I overemphasized the phrases Internet of Things and Industrial Internet of Things. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Good question. Could you talk about working as a data scientist at a startup versus a big company? That is a great question. So I have worked as a data scientist at a gigantic company, as a mid-sized startup, and then at the current company I'm at, I'm a software engineer now, but I kind of do data science stuff. At the current company I'm at, I was the 13th employee. So I think that I can speak to this. in a very big company, when you work as a data scientist, especially if you're in an entry-level data scientist role, I think you'll find that the work you're doing is very, very, very specialized. So you won't be one of 5 data scientists in the company. You will join, say ConAgra Foods as the soybean yield prediction data scientist or something like that, like very, very, very specific. And that can be good because the work is highly structured. You have clear objectives. You will probably be able to build on the things that people before you have done. And so it can be like a very, I guess, gentle introduction to the profession. But you may find that it's limiting because a year spent doing something extremely specific will be a year spent, how do I say this? A year spent doing something very specific, that has less value to you in your next job search than doing something very broad, where you kind of do a lot of different tasks. Working as a data scientist in a startup, you'll find that the work is it's not as well defined. It will just be like, we need a model for this thing, and you'll have to figure out, do we have data about the thing? Why is the thing important? What is a good model? Like, how would I even know if a model for the thing is good enough? How much time should I spend on it? What language should I use? All this other kind of stuff. So I think you'd find in a startup that it's a little bit less structured and that you'll have to do more things yourself. You'll have to maybe write tests yourself. You'll maybe have to deploy that model yourself. You'll have to convince the business people in the company that the model is worth an investment of their time and money. But you will learn a lot more in a short period of time because you have to do so many different things. And just because the culture in a startup will tend to be a little bit more open. People will be more comfortable with kind of informal mentoring relationships where you say, hey, I'm having this problem. Can you come help me with this thing? The caveat to that is I tend to advise new graduates against joining a very, very small data science team at a startup as their first job out of school. And I'll tell you why. If you join a team of, say, 2 data scientists at a startup, and you're the third one, I think that you will find that you're not able to get the coaching and mentoring that you need to develop your skills in that profession and to get better and to grow. I think you'll find that those 2 people are probably fairly overworked, and though they may mean well, they just won't have the time to give you the attention that you need. Whereas joining a slightly larger data science team in a startup, say maybe more than 8 people, you'll be exposed to a lot of different work, and you'll have people who can help you and can teach you. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, all right. So in general, what would you prefer? Would you prefer that working in a startup would be better, or working in a big company? Also, bearing in mind the fact that some big companies have a big name, so that if you want to switch to a different job, obviously that name will stick out on your resume. So in general, yeah.
So I know it may be a little frustrating to hear the answer. It depends. I really cannot recommend definitively that one is better than the other. Before I was at Uptake, I worked at a very large company. And to be honest, I really didn't like it very much. The name was impressive. The work was interesting, but the company moved very slowly. It took months for me to get even open source software installed on my laptop. I wasn't allowed to install my own things. The company culture was not the best experience. So I can't really say definitively you should care about a big company versus a small company. What I will say is in data science as a profession, the name on the resume is not as important as you would think, the name of a big company, unless you worked at one of the few very, very high profile tech companies. If you work at Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, one of those companies as a data scientist, that will stand out. In my personal opinion, just having reviewed resumes and having talked to candidates, there's no difference to me in how I view a candidate, whether they came from a small startup like Lime Bike or something, or whether they worked at an established company like, say, State Farm. So other than those couple of very high profile tech companies specifically, I don't think that joining a big kind of well-known like large company necessarily implies like is necessarily any additional value to your resume. Does that make sense?
All right. Yeah. Thanks.
Sure, no problem. What other questions can I answer? Yeah, data science professional certificates. So by that, do you mean graduate certificates from a university or like those nano degrees and online things?
Maybe online things like through IBM or Google.
Got it. Okay, yes, definitely. So it depends on what you get. If you go get one of the professional certificates from one of the 3 large public cloud providers, so that's Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, or Amazon Web Services, those immediately will help your career prospects. They're difficult to get. The tests are a couple $100s to take, but I guess I'm talking to a bunch of actuarial students, so you know about taking expensive tests. Those certifications will definitely have direct value for your career. Some other certifications, not so much. So you mentioned IBM. Unless you're coming into a place that is using the IBM cloud, going to take the time to get like an IBM Watson machine learning certification and spending that money probably will not be that valuable to you. I definitely feel that certificates that I earned on Coursera when I was early in my career helped me to get my first data science job. So completing one of those programs in Coursera, like this one. I'll put this in the chat. Like this specialization. So this is a collection of courses from Coursera. Or my favorite one. Completing something like this, I feel can be very, very helpful. I don't know why there's a question mark in the URL, sorry. Can be very, very helpful, and I feel like they really helped me early in my career. But be wary of the ones that are paid and are from companies whose names you don't see on job descriptions. So as you apply to data science jobs, you are probably not going to see a lot of data science job descriptions that say experience with IBM Cloud or experience with IBM Watson. So I guess I would say be cautious about that. But the AWS certifications, especially just because Amazon is the public cloud that people are using the most, these are really, really, really worth it. They're a really important professional credential. And you can learn this stuff pretty cheaply on a website called A Cloud Guru. This is what I use to do these exams. They have one course per each certification exam. And I would strongly recommend considering that if you're thinking of ways to bolster your resume. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, I have pretty good computer science background, good at math, but lack the statistics background. Should I learn statistics or stick with perfecting my programming skills? Great question. Really, really difficult question. If you already have a computer science background and you already know how to code, then I don't think you're going to get a good return on investment of spending more time on programming, and probably learning statistics would be valuable. There is another thing from Johns Hopkins on Coursera that is specific to statistics. Is it this one? Here you go. Boom. These are from biostatisticians at Johns Hopkins. They're very, very good, very well done. That can be a kind of way to get a quick introduction to the foundational elements of statistics without spending too much money and without the full commitment of, say, like a graduate degree in statistics. But I would recommend that. You probably will not be asked in a data science interview like, what is the difference between a gamma distribution and exponential distribution? But you should have a very good intuition for distributions, for hypothesis testing, for I don't know, summary statistic, like different measures of central tendency and summary statistics, and why you would, things like that. Those general statistical concepts, you should have a good feel for, a good intuition for. So a course like this can be very helpful. Yes, did that answer the question?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Okay.
I have a quick follow-up question on those Coursera courses from Johns Hopkins.
Sure.
I'm taking one for our foundations right now, and
Okay.
it's like a 5 to 10 part course where you complete different parts, but at the end you get a certificate. If I'm applying to jobs in the meantime, or internships or anything like that, should I mention which of those I finished, or just say that I'm sort of working towards that certificate?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it is definitely worth mentioning that you're working on that. And that can be as simple as just listing the name of the specification and then saying like, courses completed so far, and list the names of the ones that you think they'll care about. So for example, like the intro course from that is just like introduction to R. That might not actually be important to list to take up space in your resume, but because it might just be assumed if one of the other courses is called like practical machine learning in R or something like that. But yeah, I definitely think it's worth letting employers know that that's a thing that you're working towards. I mean, if you think about right, like when you apply to jobs when you're still in school, you put your degree that you're working on and your expected graduation date, right? So it's kind of the same concept.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, may I add one like a small comment? And first, thank you so much for giving us a really good presentation, and your insight was really inspiring. And one thing I try to add in is for the lead code. I think based on my experience with my friends who have a job in big IT companies, and lead code is something they have to go through. So of course, the definition of the data science is quite broad. So where you wanna seek the employment in data science, it can be from the IT or financial or insurance or a pharmaceutical companies, right? So especially for the IT, one thing I heard from my friend is during their PhD education, one thing they was ignored was how to design the algorithm and how to write the code more efficient. So in order to find a job, which is kind of high pay job, so they have to spend another 3 months before the interview to learn about all lead code and go through all the problems and then try to remember these things. So in that sense, I'm kind of recommend students who in a lower grade, it's not really a hurry to find a job. I think lead code may be a good idea to go through. And of course, if you're in a high level of the maybe seniors or already second year of the masters, I think focusing on the one you mentioned is maybe more important compared to the just because lead code takes time to getting better to become a better data scientist.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I mean, I can only speak from my experience. I have never needed to think about the time complexity of an algorithm or write an algorithm in an interview to move all the zeros in an array to the end of a list or something like that. That doesn't mean that those jobs aren't out there that require that. In my experience, I have never experienced it. So yeah, just I guess will kind of depend. Sometimes for larger companies, you can actually go on Glassdoor and find out what the interview is like at that company. And so you may be able to go on Glassdoor and find out that particular company that you're interested in requires you to do some live coding, some algorithm tests, and then lead code will be a good fit for you. Okay, I know that we are at time, so I'll answer this one more question that Helen put in the chat. And then if that's okay, I can share my email address with you. Anybody can email me questions that you have later. So the last question was, how important is having a master's or PhD to becoming a data scientist? That is a phenomenal question. I think you'll find that the majority of practicing professional data scientists have a graduate degree. I don't know the breakdown between master's and PhD. I personally don't have a PhD. Anecdotally, I feel like there are more people with master's degrees who are practicing data scientists than there are with PhDs, and that's just about different base rates, right? Like there are just more people in the world with master's degrees than PhDs. They can be very important. I do not think that it is absolutely required. One of the best data scientists that I've ever worked with started his career right out of undergraduate and never got a graduate degree and is phenomenal. People come to data science different ways. They may get out of undergraduate, go and pick up some other type of job like a data analyst or something, and then do one of those 8-week, 10-week, 12-week machine learning or data science boot camps. That is like a well-established path to a career in this field. So I don't think that it's required. It can be very helpful. And for some companies that are not very comfortable with data science, honestly, companies where data science is kind of new and where they may have just gone to Google and Googled data scientist job description, you may see a requirement that says you have to have a graduate degree in a quantitative field. And so that is a reality. There will be some jobs that require it. I don't think it's broadly required to be a part of the profession. The one other thing that I'll say is you should not feel like you have to have a graduate degree in data science. The graduate degrees in data science are a fairly new phenomenon, and many of them are not very high quality, to be honest. So usually the requirement that you'll see on a job will be like preferred qualification, master's degree or PhD in one of these 8 fields or something similar. You can ignore the list of fields. If you're applying to the job, you already know something about programming and statistics. Yeah, so sorry, kind of a long answer. There will be jobs that strictly require a graduate degree. I think that those are the minority of data science jobs. There are many that will have a strong preference for it, but not require it. And you can prove your ability to do the job in other ways besides having a master's degree. So it's not a strict barrier to entry. Okay, I can answer this one really quickly. How important is Spark and Hadoop to finding a data scientist job? If I only had 3 hours a week to focus on making myself more attractive as a data scientist candidate, I would not spend the 3 hours learning Spark and Hadoop. There are a lot of companies that are using Apache Spark and Hadoop for a variety of tasks. You will see Spark and Hadoop listed on job descriptions, but the advice that you have to know Hadoop to be a data scientist is kind of outdated advice from like maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Many companies are working with other tools today, and Spark and Hadoop are kind of like treated as the previous generation of data processing tools. With that, I will share my email address with you. Any of you are welcome to send me an email if you have other questions. Doesn't just have to be today. Whenever you have other questions. And yeah, with that, thank you so much for giving me the time to speak. It was really interesting. Thank you so much for all of the great questions that everyone asked today.
Thank you, James, for presenting this talk to us. Very interesting. And also I'll mention that your talk is on GitHub, right? It's
Yes.
on your username /talks.
Yes. Yes, so I keep all of my talks here publicly. You can get this one right there.
And everyone can also find James on LinkedIn, Twitter, email, whatsoever.
Yes, wherever you want to find me.
Yeah. I think James is also very active on Twitter.
Yeah.
Maybe also tweeting memes.
That's right.
Yeah. And James is also maintainer of a few open source packages. So you might run into his name at some point.
Yeah, definitely. I hope to see you all out there.
Okay. So thank you for everyone's time. And we're already 7 minutes over time. With respect to everyone's time, let's close it now. But if you have general questions regarding was IRisk Lab, you can always contact Professor Chong. I believe he's in charge this semester. If you have ideas about future topics, you can either contact Professor Chong or myself at HCY10. If you want to follow up with James, he has all these contact information listed here, and you can always find him online.
All right. Enjoy your week, everyone.
All right.
Great. Thank you, James.
Sure.